Welcome, everyone.
It's so awesome to have you today.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here.
Christ nailed to a cross. There's something in the life of Abraham that points us towards Christ.
And so Jesus is fully God.
We're fully accepted.
How have you been finding Grow over the past couple of weeks, St. Paul?
I love it.
The Google Classroom.
Chicken fit is delicacy for so many people.
Community around the table.
Yes. Putting more vegetables in our menu through the week.
And enjoy praising.
Good evening and welcome to SNL. We're so glad you joined us tonight. I want to encourage you, guys, participate, comment, ask questions tonight. We are talking about a subject that's not typically talked about at church, so this is the perfect opportunity to ask those difficult questions that you don't ordinarily ask. I'm excited. I'm going to take notes about it. And yeah, just getting back to commenting and engaging. I know for me, the start of lockdown, it was difficult to engage in church online, and it wasn't until I decided to participate and not just spectate that it really made a difference to me. Linking to what Dylan said this morning, I love how we get to choose. We can either just play for the final whistle, or we can actually choose to do life passionately and do it as life as God intended us to do it. So with that, we are having a sublime conversation, and Nicole, thank you so much for expanding my vocabulary. I really appreciate it. But over to you, Kevin and Kelsey, and our sublime guests.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jan Ben. We are excited to be talking about sex this evening. It's going to be really good. And so I think without any further ado, let's welcome our guests, Dylan and Mancha.
It's so good. It's so good to have you back, Mancha.
Thank you so much for having me.
And it's so good to have you for the first time on
Good to be
Sunday Night
here.
Live. You've worked hard this weekend.
Yeah.
Had fun though.
I was going to say, like, it's
It's been a big
a
weekend.
weekend for you. He came from foot golf.
Foot golf?
Literally.
Foot golf.
I wish I could say it went well.
Did you
It would have been a
win?
good. Nah.
Aw.
Yeah, in my heart I did.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You won over the locals.
I agree.
Good.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, maybe you're wondering who is Dylan, who is Mancha. If you're just tuning in, it's your first time. Mancha, you run Church of Jesus Christ. You have written a number of books. The latest one is out, which is called
Level up,
Level Up, Level Up, Level Up. Yeah. And that's all about creating exceptional
careers.
which is pretty amazing. You're an author. I love your books. Single and Loving It, top of my list. I'm telling you, read that book. But welcome. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey.
And then we also have Dylan with us. Dylan Janich. Everybody with your surname, but I think I got it.
That works. I like
Okay,
it. Yeah.
Yes.
Janach.
Okay, cool. From Link Church in Belido.
Properly said.
Janach.
Janich.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, I'm a Vandermerwe that doesn't pronounce Vandermerwe, so
How's it go? Van der Merwe?
yeah, or Vandermerwe. Yeah, no,
That's
I'm
pretty
just
cool.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's very new age.
So I think let's get into the conversation. Are you guys ready? I know Mancha's feeling a little nervous. She's like, why am I here? But it's going to be good.
And for those of you sitting at home that are watching now, please comment, ask questions. These two, they're larger than life. They are knowledgeable, wise,
Yeah.
beyond their years, and so they've got the answers to some of your questions. Some, not all.
Thank you.
But please put them in the comment section if you're brave enough to ask for a friend. If you hashtag asking for a friend at the end of your question, it's not your question.
Yeah.
So,
Again.
You're literally
you
asking
can
for
do
a
it.
friend.
But please, we want to know your questions. And even if you're watching this after we've been live, so if you're watching it during the week,
On demand.
please ask questions as well, and I'm sure we'll follow up.
Yeah.
Cool. What's the first question?
So the first question is, why is sex such a big thing in our culture?
Is that for me first? Or?
Oh,
I feel like this is just right into your sweet spot, you know? Like, why is it such a big deal?
So I think it's because of the mystery that is around it, and because
you see Manchek. Go girl.
Already, it's like,
and I think it's because, I mean, in my culture, I'm Pedi, but even though I'm Pedi, I represent quite a lot of other African cultures. But I also noticed that it's generally the same across different cultures. So the first thing is, our parents assumed that if they don't talk to us about sex, then we won't engage in it. And they also assumed that if they talk to us about it, it means they are encouraging us to engage in sex. Wow. So in an attempt to get us to be good girls and good boys when we were growing up, the idea was tell them as little as possible about it. But I think what they then forgot was that on the streets, information and most of the time misinformation about sex abounds, and the idea on the streets is to get you as curious as possible about sex. And I think the second thing that makes our parents to be like that, and I mean now I'm the parent, the reason why we are like that is because we think about our own mistakes, and in an attempt to shield the generation that comes after us from the mistakes that we made, we then go overboard and we actually do the one thing that makes them to be curious about sex.
Okay.
That's crazy good.
Yeah.
That's crazy good. Mine is simpler than I think the unknown of it. That's just simply what it is. Anything that's unknown is confusing, complex. It becomes taboo because no one's really talking about it. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why tonight's pretty cool. And of course, the image that Hollywood has portrayed about this idea of sex has really messed our minds up a little bit around what it could look like. You know, we have no genuine what it looks like with a kind of healthy relationship. So.
Yeah.
That's what it is, the unknown. I like this.
Yeah. And I just want to give our viewers some context of you guys. I thought of that while you guys were answering it, just going, well, Mancha, you are a single lady and you lead a church. You are an avid runner. I remember that one. You're an author and all of these things, a speaker. And then Dylan, you lead a church down in Ballito, and you have how many children with your
Four
wife?
kids.
4 kids?
4 kids,
Okay.
yeah. 3 girls and a boy.
There you go.
You.
So we've tried to get a varied kind of spectrum, and anyway. And you're
you're
single,
also married.
I'm married, 2 kids. So okay, cool. Any other questions?
So
we have.
Yeah, we have one from Warren that's just come up, which I think is quite a good question.
Is sex just physical?
It's like the biggest, like...
I feel like we'll throw this to you, Dylan.
You guys are not even like, look, it depends. Are you a guy or are you a girl? Because like, for my wife, intimacy, sex in our marriage is for her a far more than physical experience. It's emotional. I mean, for both of us, for sure, but for her, far more so. I would assume many ladies would agree with this, but like... For us to pursue a healthy sex life or a healthy intimacy, it means me doing things like the dishes, making little gestures. There's an emotional journey toward the moments of intimacy, far more so with a girl than a guy. For a guy, you know, the picture's enough. You know, like she is enough. Is that enough information?
Well, yeah,
safe.
That's safe information.
Yeah.
I think for a guy, physical is just, it's a real deal, like 90% physical, right? I see her and I'm like, this is all we ever dreamed of, you know? Whereas for her, it's a whole journey toward that moment, so.
Yeah, it's a lot more, there's a lot more that goes into it.
Totally.
Yeah, from my experience.
From your experience.
Yeah. Notice the stop-starts in our language, like,
I mean, like, well.
Hashtag, we're still learning. Here we go.
Yeah. And we'll continue to learn. Yeah,
but I think it's really helpful in a context like this to have a conversation, whether you're married or not, single or not. I think Ruan also asked a question now, but it's really helpful, I think, even as a single person to go, okay, we're actually going to talk about sex, and it's not going to be taboo, it's not going to be something that's hidden. But for me, that just created so much like freedom to be able to say, hey, I have some questions. And a question that came in actually from someone was, what is the biggest difference between the expectation of sex versus the reality, especially like, let's say, your first time? Because that's built up quite a bit, you know, after the wedding, like, what was the biggest difference between the expectation?
Is sex worth the hype?
Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like you wanted to jump in there,
I
Kev.
don't.
Kevity?
It's just, you know.
This question is just for the two of you.
Kevity, Kevity.
Yours is coming. Mancha, yours is coming. Don't worry.
It's just, don't worry, we'll get you.
I think, I mean, for again, it's back to the emotional thing. There is an emotional, relational journey to sex. It really just isn't a physical one-off act. It doesn't start there, doesn't end there. And so, yeah, the wedding night, many would laugh. Those who are married and have explored that journey and whatever, many would laugh and say, it just wasn't what we anticipated, you know? It's
Not
just,
at all.
exactly right.
It's not at all.
Let's just call it what it is, you know?
It's, I mean, you go in, you think, hey, this is going to be Hollywood kind of style. Or
Certainly
not
as a
style.
guy, yeah.
Or, watch my language, yeah.
Style.
But it's going to look like Hollywood, you know, and it's just not. It's awkward.
Yeah. And each party feels totally different about it, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a long journey, like for sure. It's just that's the beauty of it in its rightful place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it grows over time. It doesn't lose its momentum over time if it's healthy and it's journeyed well, and we see each other in light of how each person pursues it. Over time, it gets more fun, it gets more exciting, it gets more adventurous. Whatever that looks like, it's healthy, right?
Yeah.
So no, day one doesn't look like that at all, actually.
Not at all.
And Mancha, for you, maybe, how do you view sex as a single person?
So I think one, coming from the type of culture and from the church that I come from, talking about sex is quite hard. And being an author of a book called Single and Loving It, I'm expected to talk about sex a lot.
Yeah.
Because single people want to know, so what must they do now? Because when you are in your 20s, you have this hope that you're going to get married. But
Yeah.
the more you approach like late 30s, 40s, actually that hope begins to dim. And you are confronted with a new question that you've never had growing up, which is, if I never get married, does it mean I have to abstain forever?
Yeah.
And that's a question that nobody talks about. And that's a question that everyone assumes that we all have an answer for.
Yeah.
So we are very clear as Christian people that if you are not married, you are supposed to abstain. But we were always given a carrot, abstain, be a good girl, because when you are married, then you're not going to have sexual issues. But now when you are 55 and you've never been married and it looks like you'll never get married, there's no carrot anymore. So I think... what I've then found, I think in the past 4 years or so, when I've been talking about sex a bit more and thinking about what it means for me as a person as well, because, you know, I'm going to give an example that is not very good. So, you know, when a woman is pregnant, the milk from the boobs will only start coming when the child is about to come. Our boobs, when we are not pregnant, don't have milk. Why didn't God come up with a similar formula for sex so that you don't have sexual feelings?
That's really good, eh?
When you don't have
really
a
good.
man next
If you enjoyed that, come on, just shout. If you enjoyed that, I personally want to see the hands go up,
Yeah.
because that was like fire emoji stuff.
So I think then
Great example, by the way.
the challenge now is when we talk about abstinence, we don't talk about the fact that, but you have the sexual feelings. What do you
Yeah,
do?
we have a God-given sex drive. So,
and if you don't
how
have
do
it,
we...
you should go to the doctor, I think.
Yes, do. So what do you do with those?
So I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I'll take it back to scripture, that self-control is a fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah, come on,
and
it's good.
self-control, in as much as single people, we have to exercise it, and those who are married can confirm that even when you are married, if you happen to be attracted to someone, you can't say, oh no, I don't have to exercise. You still exercise self-control even when you are married. So I think
Good.
it's just important for us to say the feelings will be there. I mean, I've prayed the prayers, Holy Spirit, take them away. You didn't comply. You know,
me and you both.
And it's because at that time we were taught fast, pray, and the feelings will go away. Then when they don't go away, they frustrate you. But now I think I understand that they are part of my life.
That's
and
so
in the
good.
same way, if I see a Porsche that I like, I don't grab it if it's not mine. I don't have to do anything about feeling a certain way. It's just about control. But a lot of us are walking around feeling quite guilty about the fact that we have sexual feelings.
Yeah.
And we end up even looking outside at wrong things for solutions, because in the church, discussions like this are just not there.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's good. I'm just like,
I
come
don't
on,
know
girl.
what I mean. So people have answered to our hype question: is sex worth the hype? And somebody says people are very tired after a wedding. That's Melissa. And then another question here is: why is sex reserved for marriage? Why can't a couple sleep together if they are dating and committed to each other? And that, I mean, both of you can answer, because we can just take it right out of scripture, I think.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things someone once described it as, I mean, there's so many ways to look at it. I mean, for sure, it's straight out of the Bible in terms of God has boundaries for this. It's a healthy boundary. But they said you wouldn't light a fire in a log cabin. Like, you wouldn't do that, you know. Yeah, fireplace, there's a place to light fires.
Yeah.
Now, the sexual drives we have, it's a burning desire. It's strong. It's exciting. It's robust. It's not just a one-off thing. It's in us. It's simmering all the time. And so you got to know where you want to light that thing. And I think one of the greatest things is realizing that marriage is God's gift to where that fire burns best. It just burns best there. It's the boundary He gave. It's the joy of the journey. You can figure stuff out as you go on this journey committed together. And so you do that outside of marriage. Again, one of the analogies that I once saw was two paper. You've probably seen this at a wedding, right? Everyone's been to a wedding where the preacher goes, he had two pieces of paper, you know, and this is what happens when you pull them apart. We get stuck on each other. And I think that's just the journey. So much of who we are gets kind of left behind in a destructive sexual journey before marriage, you know, and you lose a bit. And I'll just be honest here, like, that was my story going into marriage, you know. So I'm not talking as this guy that had it all worked out. I'm talking as a guy that made some pretty big mistakes in my early years and was able, by the grace of God, to enjoy the best part of this journey now in marriage. And I think that's important. Someone might be hearing that going, gosh, what do I do? There's grace for your season, you know, but just realize marriage is where the fire burns best.
Yeah. And I think when we're dealing with people who are hurt in relationships, most of the hurt is because of those sexual relationships that happen.
Totally, yeah.
And sometimes when you are counseling people as a pastor, or when you are just speaking with your friends, sometimes because you're a pastor, they're not comfortable telling you that they've been sexually involved. But in a way, you can see that there's a whole lot more pain, more hurt. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's the same for the guys, but I think for the women, it's even greater. And if we are to be honest with ourselves, all of us who have been involved sexually outside of marriage know that that's probably one of the biggest pains and biggest hurt that we have had to deal with. And I think the more we don't talk about it, the more we create a picture that, you know what, life was like super, super perfect. We've never made mistakes. And even people who have made mistakes, as you've said earlier, they feel like there's no grace for them. And people don't backslide because they don't want God anymore. They backslide because they feel like, oh my God, I've let God down so many times. But I think that knowledge that there's grace for you. But at the same time, then, if you are that person who is involved sexually and you're still continuing now is a good time to stop. And I always say, if you are in a relationship with someone and you're sexually active and you want to stop, don't discuss and say, yeah, let's stop, but let's continue with the relationship. It's probably better, even if it's for some time, if you are ultimately going to get married, to say, okay, let's stop being sexually involved, but let's also be apart. Because now you're going to have to deal with a cycle of always saying, oh no, we had decided that we're not going to sleep together. I don't know what happened. The clothes just fell off my body, you know? And then we have to keep on discussing it over and over and over again.
So, Dylan, this one would be for you. How would you communicate your desires to your partner? So, in marriage, what's a healthy way of, I don't know.
Do you just talk about it? Or are you just like, well, like, hey, I mean, like, not meaning
I was going to say, like, literally, Tess and I are in a season of life where we just talk about it, you know, because for starters, our oldest girl who's 12 now, we've had the chat with her. She knows how this whole thing goes down. We know what it's all about. In our home, it's not a random subject. It's table time conversation. Yeah. And our next girl down is 10. She also knows about it at a different level. 7 is just figuring it out. But because of that, Tess and I have realized, look, if we can talk with them, like, we should just be open with each other, you know? Sure. And so we do. I'll just tell her as a guy, these are genuinely my desires. These are my, I don't know if fantasy is the right word, but that's what's going through my mind and heart, and it's what's burning in me. How about you, you know? And some of the things we feel like we meet on quite quickly, and we're like, yeah, you know. Okay. Other things, it's like, I just don't know. Like, you're going to have to unpack that a little bit. You know, what's that even about? So anyone who's watching is probably wanting to know, like, what's the detail here? The whole point is the detail's not that's for your journey, right?
Yeah.
But it's the ability to say, I have this desire. This is what it is. How about you? And again, it's why marriage is where it's meant to take place.
Absolutely.
This outside of marriage, it just doesn't have any weight to it. You know, it's so loose. You know, so.
Yeah, that's really good. I think there's another great question. So how do people set themselves up for a good sex life before marriage? You know, it's not the kind of thing you can practice or anything. How do you set yourself up?
That's right, Kelsey. 100%. Yeah. True story.
So how would you say, you know?
So for me, as
single and loving it.
It was a go man to go.
So You know, I think the expectation and the anticipation, I don't want to have that. Because maybe it's also because I'm old. Maybe if I was 25, it would be easier. So I just think certain things in life, you will just deal with them when you get there. Because how else? I don't know. How else can you prepare?
Yeah, would you? Yeah, exactly.
So for me, I just think, and what Dylan, what you said earlier around communication, I just imagine that's what would be important. The fact that you are able to talk to the person that you are married to about what you like and what you don't like. Whereas, I mean, back in the day, how we thought about how sex happens. Okay, now I feel bad for saying I think about sex, but yeah, how we thought about how sex happens is you switch off the lights and you are just trying to find each other because
all of that.
You know, so in my mind I was just like, but surely that's really horrible.
She's awesome, man. Like, she's awesome.
So I think rather than spend so much of your single time, you know, even if you're engaged, rather than spend so much of that time trying to think about how the sex is going, you're actually going to frustrate yourself. So yeah, so actually I liked what somebody said there, which I think for me, the day that I get married is what I'm going to hold on to. That on the wedding day, people are tired.
They're tired. More than one story I've heard about that.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like, it's helpful to have people actually say that to you, because I think sometimes there's so much expectation on the wedding night and, you know, that sort of thing. But what I've loved, at least, is having married couples around going, hey, like, actually, let me just be honest with you, that's not what it looks like. Because I think sometimes we'd get caught up, even as a single, of like, okay, I've seen Hollywood, or at least some, you know, so kind of that's where you think it is. So it's helpful to have people who are further along just going like, hey, actually, I'll just be honest with you.
Yeah. There's another question. Is sexual compatibility a myth?
That's kind of like what we were just talking about, right? Like, how do you get yourself ready for this reality of it? That's like suggesting, is there a way to check on that, like before? So I would say like compatibility, for sure. There may be some that find their sex life easier to pursue than others. I get that. Every couple has their story. But to suggest that there's one that it works with, I don't know. Like, then what happens if you choose the wrong one and then it's out of cycle and then the next one gets to the wrong person?
Parking spot.
Exactly, right? And so the whole thing spins out of cycle. No, this whole thing, I think this is to pull back to the idea of God gave sex. This is such a big deal. In the Garden of Eden, he says, man and woman, naked, unashamed. That was the ground for sex, right? Naked and unashamed. Then they made some bad decisions. They covered themselves up with leaves. They went on a crazy journey in the wilderness and they were full of shame. And what we've got to do is peel back the layers that have created shame. Look, the desires are not shameful. Your past history should not be shameful. What mom and dad did or didn't tell you shouldn't. Let's peel back those layers. Let's get back to a place of nakedness, which is, this is what I desire. And this is kind of who I am. And that wasn't great. Could we try that again? That's naked and unashamed.
That's good.
So like, can you check compatibility? No, you've just got to get into the journey together. Like, this is why I keep saying it, like young people that, someone's shouting so good. Preach! Come on. Preach it. But like I keep saying to young guys, like, listen, take the journey slowly. There's a whole journey to how to do singleness well, which I'd love to hear more from you as well. But, you know, when you do find this connection and this pursuit and there's a dating and we're gonna do this thing, I want to tell you, you're in for the adventure of your life. Don't avoid this idea that it's gonna be an adventure. It's not just like this. It's an ongoing and it's exciting, right? So you should look forward to it, but don't jump in too soon.
Yeah, that's good. I have a question. Are there dangers of sex within marriage? Would you say? So obviously we can talk about the dangers of sex outside of marriage, but would you say that there are dangers of sex within a marriage?
It's a great question. So there was this thing, I didn't come up with it. I wish I did. But he spoke about sex being either a God or gift or gross. And he said, this is what happens, right? Sex is this gift from God. And what we do as culture is we either make it gross, like it's taboo, you don't go there, like we don't talk about it, that's for behind. Or we make it a God where it's like the Hollywood story, right? And it's like, it's
the pinnacle, it's the
and it's, you know, when you hear guys around the bar talking about their sex life with their wives not around, it's really not a good sign, right? And I think that still happens. There's this like that's God. And then there's the gross thing, which is like, we don't ever talk about it. We never have married conversations. We never chat about it with our friends and ask them if they've learned anything that works, which I think is actually quite helpful. And then there's the middle line, which is gift. And it is beautiful and it's pure and it's just this God gift to be unwrapped, right? I have no idea what the question was, but I feel like that's...
to get married.
Come on. In Jesus' name.
The dangers of That was the.
It's good for people to
Yeah.
hear sex as a
Yeah.
gift. It's,
Yeah.
it's a gift within marriage to be unwrapped and journeyed through, and that's the journey.
Absolutely. We've got
Yeah.
way more.
Yeah. So
questions.
then, just off the back of that, when is sex helpful?
I think when you look, there is like so there are married people watching, right,
Yeah.
and single people watching.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
to the married people, here's what often happens: people get it like there's a tension, or marriages come to a head, and there's like this thing of like the husband's really desiring it. Like there's the good old 72-hour rule, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. It's just a good thing to understand. Like the drive climbs, and it's a good time to say it would be healthy for us to have sex now. It would be healthy for us to not allow this thing to go too far and put him in danger zone. And so there's that. But there's this other thing where it's like us, it's not always going to feel perfect.
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole journey. Like, sometimes, whether it's in our marriage, and I'll just be honest, sometimes I just feel like making out with my wife, and other times, and that she might not.
Yeah.
But because we're on this journey, she's like, this is good for us, And there's other times when there's just this beautiful journey up toward a moment of intimacy, and you go, could it be like that every time? Why was that so perfect? And then you realize what took place So when's the right time? People figure that out, but don't wait until the perfect time. That's the point,
Yeah,
Sex is a gift to marriage, not just to be unwrapped in the moment, but to actually build a healthy marriage. So healthy marriages build good intimacy into there.
So it takes work as well.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
sex, is it easy? You'd say no, it still takes work.
Yeah, totally. Every couple watching, if you're watching this now,
I don't know. Could this be helpful?
yeah, every couple watching right now is going like, amen to the honesty of this
Yeah,
moment. Like, it takes a lot of hard work,
Yep.
and the reality is add kids to the mix, and Jesus help us all, so yeah.
So maybe that leads you to have you had an awkward moment when a child has come in, knocked on the door, not knocked on the door, walked in?
Sunday
I
Night
don't know.
Live,
Sunday Night Live.
candid conversations, cut.
Kids.
No, never. Okay. There was a question, sex and soul ties. Is there...
I'll be honest, I don't understand all that.
Yeah.
I don't.
I'm not qualified on that to talk about that, but I've heard much about it.
So I personally, I could not find scripture that backs it up. And unfortunately, it also brings a lot of shame and some idea that there's this hierarchy to sins, that God struggles to deal with sexual sin if you have encountered some kind of sexual sin. And a lot of people are walking around with guilt because they feel like, oh my God. And I don't know if you've ever been in a session where soul ties were broken. I mean, it sounds like something from the Old Testament, right? It's like we are
That
doing
is
a
the truth.
ritual, to deal with the soul ties. So if you happen to have been one of those people that was sexually active a lot before you got born again, you then carry this guilt with you always, because it seems that when the blood of Jesus was saving you, it could save you from everything else except this one thing, that you have to do something extra for it. And for me, any teaching that says when you come to Christ, you still need something more, I find it contrary to the covenant that we are in. So I think in as much as I can understand the principle that they're trying to teach, to then say soul ties is something that comes from the word is not correct, according to me. So rather, I think what we maybe need to just deal with is some of the emotional and psychological challenges that you may have as a person because you were sexually active. And I think if we deal with it like that, then it may be the same way that you deal with any trauma. And I'll call it trauma, because being sexually involved, whether it was with multiple partners or with just this one partner that you were with for a very long time and things didn't work out, you thought it was going to end up in marriage and it didn't. It comes with some kind of trauma, and you're dealing with it at that psychological and emotional level, and not necessarily at a spiritual level, because now people are casting demons, and Christ has died for all my sins. So I just think it's a teaching. I don't subscribe to it, and anyone who subscribes to it, what I would say to them is try and find scriptures that speak to that teaching, otherwise abandon it completely.
Some
Yeah,
power
that's
there.
good. You always finish, I'm like, I need a moment.
Okay, so how do we assist single people who want to get married, and how would you be friends to those people? Oh, just to have sex. These people are talking to my ear.
That's the thing.
I can't read.
It was one of
What's
those
not
moments
doing?
where we were
Alright,
both
here we
like,
go.
wait a second.
Here it is. I'm gonna level with all of you. So I've got an earphone in here. Producers are talking to me. They're telling me not to read the questions on the screen. Then they're talking to me and telling me the question, and I've got it wrong. So, Kelsey, you want to have a go at this?
And
I
the
think-
producer is your wife, which complicates the.
It's not.
It's not.
Amen. Amen.
It's
I think
not.
the question was kind of just like, what advice would you give to a single person who just wants to get married for the sake of having sex?
That
Almost
sounds like
like-
a much better question
Yeah,
than the one
that's
I
how I
asked.
would phrase it. That's not exactly what it was, but maybe that's how I would phrase the question.
Well, I was told the question twice.
But there was like assisting or something. I don't know.
Well, let's be honest. This happens often, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's say it like this: in the church, this happens often, because we realize there's this boundary, there's this moral high ground, and it's all in marriage. And so, sometimes at a young age, you go, "I know that that's the next step if I want this to become a more intimate relationship." And so, you pursue the steps. You get there. You start the journey. 3-6 months. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes 3-6 months in, you realize there is so much that we haven't journeyed through. We don't even know each other.
Yeah.
And yet we're so intimately involved. So then the question is, can it still work? Of course it can. Cheers.
Holy
It's Sunday
moly.
Night Live, folks.
It's just going from bad to worse. I think the next thing I'm going to fall off the chair and then just creep out.
What did they
out
say
the
in your ears that time, bud?
Good grief. Well, that's down. That's a mouse that we use to read the questions, but I'll just get it
Just
from
keep
our
asking
producer.
them.
You know what? Without counsel, plans fail. That's what Proverbs says.
Yeah.
I think it might even been preached in church recently.
Recently.
Well, it's coming up soon. Watch this space. But without counsel, plans fail. Find somebody who's done the journey. Ask them for advice. They're going to give you some pretty interesting advice. Someone who's got a healthy marriage that you aspire to, and you're going, I want to do it. It's the next obvious step.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised the wisdom that can flow from someone that's walked the journey. You know.
Absolutely.
Good.
And then there was another question, and I will get this one right. It is, how do you deal with, so you waited for marriage to have sex in marriage, but your partner didn't. How do you deal with that? I mean, I don't know if you've dealt with this issue as pastors, with people in your church, or you've dealt with this. But how would you go about dealing or helping these people through that kind of space and journey?
So I'll be honest. So Tess and our journey. I had sexual partner. She hadn't, and yet together we had been in a sexual relationship before we got married. This is setting someone free out there right now, and so when we got into marriage, we had our own issues from the way we did relationship, which is kind of what brought us together was intimacy, which is a challenge because intimacy doesn't keep you together.
Yep.
It's only a part of it.
Yeah.
And so, we went into
preach.
marriage with a little bit of stuff. We actually broke up for a year. This is a cool story.
Wow.
Just before we got married, we got saved. And a few years before we got married, we got saved. And so we figured our relationship's so messed up because everything's involved,
Yeah.
So we broke up. We took a year off and said, hey, if something, shout out to Santana who's just sneaking through here. No one can see you, bro,
No one
but we
can see
can.
Dude, I'm not
And it's
even gonna
awesome.
use
Just
that.
give the cameras
This
a
is
wave.
Sunday Night Live.
Just give the cameras a wave. They'll be
got
so
my mouse
grateful.
It's like magically.
I got my mouse back.
I have no idea what I was saying.
You're telling us a
You
story.
broke
of
up for a
sex.
year?
Oh yeah, so we gave ourselves time apart without any connection. We didn't date, we didn't see each other. Literally,
Wow.
we saw each other, but we weren't hanging out because we wanted to see could we do life without each other. Were we so needy of one another, intimately, that we couldn't be ourselves?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Sure.
And so by the time we got married, there was a different journey. But taking into marriage, my background and then our background together, it was a process. And the best way I could say to deal with it, if this is you, is to put it in the open.
Wow.
That thing's going to find you somewhere down the line. It did for us. It's going to find you somewhere down the line. And so this is not this is not oh my word, where's the confession booth? It's not about that.
Yeah.
Phone a friend that you're really this is speaking to you right now. Phone a friend and say, hi, I just need to get some advice on this. There's some stuff that hasn't been spoken about and I can feel it's starting to build. Let God's grace come upon that. There's a lot God can do with your open hands,
Another question. We had this question last week.
We did, yeah.
Is how far is too far? So before you have sex or it is deemed sex, well, where's the line?
Yeah. Do
Where's
you
the
draw a line? Yeah, where is the line?
So when we were growing up in church at youth, they said the minute you ask that question, it's too far.
Probably a good indicator.
True story. Yeah, exactly.
Because you're starting to feel uncomfortable. That's why you're asking the question.
Yes.
And I think in as much as biologically we know what sex is, I think when you cross a certain line in a relationship, you actually don't need an audience member to tell you, you've crossed the line, because there's no audience. It's just the two of you.
Hopefully there's no audience.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
So for many of us, I think we have become masters of silencing our conscience.
Wow.
And part
Wow.
of the culture that we live in encourages that. You know, I'll give an example. So there was a time when you wouldn't see a lot of kissing on TV. It was strange. I mean, I remember when we were young, for those who are a little bit older, when kissing came on TV, we used to close our eyes. And if there were kids in the room,
You close their eyes too.
but now, if kissing happens on TV, it's not a big deal. If people, kiss to the point of even trying to get to the bed, it's not a big deal. And what you don't realize is that for us as a society, our standards keep getting lower and lower and lower.
Wow.
Sometimes you see a story in which somebody's trying to break up a marriage, and you catch yourself silently rooting for the side chick, and then you realize, oh my God, we are messed up as a nation. But it's because the way that they are telling the story, they are making that side chick story to look so glamorous that they make you fall in love with wrong. So in your own life as well, the more you silence, you do something you're not supposed to do, and you rationalize it in your mind, your conscience is not agreeing with it, but you silence your conscience. I mean, the Bible says at the end it's seared, and now even when it speaks, you can't hear it. So whether it's us as young people or single people, or even in marriage, listen to that. And I think you can even pray if you don't hear, you don't have that discernment anymore, you don't hear your conscience anymore. You can actually ask God to say, you know what, God, I've been this girl who has been doing all these wrong things. Now I can't even tell the difference between wrong and right. Help me so that I can hear you again.
Wow.
So good.
Any advice for people who, I suppose it wouldn't work. So I mean, they want to have sex. They're gonna do it outside of marriage. Any kind of hey, don't do that, and then so charge them or challenge them. And then I'd say, because there's lots of people, and I know it happens within the churches. People know this, but they still go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
So any challenge for them, and then any charge for those in marriage around sex. They playing the music to get me out.
It's like,
I know what it is. They're closing music.
This is like the piano at the Oscars.
Just a quick rapid fire.
So the one thing I will say,
word of wisdom.
we all know the David story in the Bible. David and Bathsheba, classic story told about how he dropped the ball and this amazing guy went down the wrong road and did this thing. The point is, he wasn't in the battle. He was on the roof. He should have been in the battle.
Yeah.
David was called to be on the front line, and he was born for the front line, and this time he was on the roof. So I would just say to anyone, listen, here's the thing. You could get really caught up in whether you're right or wrong, whether you should, whether you shouldn't, whether you, don't focus on the wrong conversation. Here's the better conversation. What's God called you to?
There you go.
What's the high ground?
Yeah,
What's the battleground look like? Are you called to reach people, make music, start a church, build a business, whatever that looks like? Get back in the battle so that your eyes don't wander across the roof, because actually that's kind of what happened, right?
Yeah.
And even in marriage, same deal. For me, if I'm not in the battle, I'm going to wonder. So make sure you're doing something, get back in the battle,
Get back in the battle.
Everyone's got a battle.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Copy and paste for single people, and I think I think for the longest time, certain ministries in the church were reserved for marriage.
Yeah.
You couldn't even take on certain leadership positions as a single person. But I think the church is open now for us.
Come on.
And I think one of the things that we realize as the church is actually a lot of single people have additional capacity. If you don't have to iron for the pants for someone, if you don't feel like cooking, you don't cook, you can actually sit and be on Sunday Night Live, and then when the married people are gone, the single people can pack up everything. So I think
it's a good idea.
Amen.
And I think if for us as single people, we can deny ourselves an opportunity to get depressed about our marital status, to get depressed about who I don't have, and the fact that I'm not having sex, and focus on what we have and what we can do with what we have. Because most of the time, I if I wanted to get depressed about being 41 and single, I could. It's so
It's
easy.
pretty easy.
It's so it doesn't take work, but the other stuff, the stuff that is important, requires work. So if you're sitting at home, you're stressed about having. I always say, sometimes as single people we think married people are having sex every hour. Chances are they are not even having sex every hour. So the stuff that is frustrating you is not even true. It's not even
come
happening.
on.
So when you are married, you're like, Kanti, we're going to do this thing once a week. Mina was ready for every day and every night, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's very important for us as single people to just sit back,
Go.
focus on what God
That
has
is
called
the
us,
truth.
and
So
try
good,
and forget
Mancha.
about things we
Come
don't
on.
have.
Amazing.
That is the
So
truth.
good. Well, Dylan and Mancha, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's just
was
been
so good to have you
so
guys.
good. I'm going to rewatch it and take notes again because my goodness. But I think for now, it's over to you, Jan Ben.
Thank you, Kelsey. Guys, I'll be honest. I was meant to focus on one point that stood out to me tonight, and there are multiple. And like Kelsey, I will again be watching this tonight and making notes on it. So, I mean, the first thing that stood out to me, and I'll try and remember everything that I thought, but just the idea that sex is a journey. It's not this end goal to be fantasized or to think is the ultimate point, but it's kind of like this lifelong journey. I really appreciated that. It's not just the one night or the first night, the wedding night or whatever. It's about more than that. And similarly, I think it's so easy for us in today's time to either treat it as gross, i.e. we avoid it altogether, or we treat it as God, or put it as an idol in our lives and think that is the only thing that will satisfy me. Thinking that the sexual desires that we might have is like the ultimate question or difficulty that we will struggle. And once we've had that, everything else will fall into place. So I took a lot of value from what was said by both our guests. I think they are truly sublime, and I think they have a lot of wisdom to share for different reasons. So I'm truly grateful. And like I said, I will definitely be listening to this again. So with that, over to Magic Mike for a game called If You Laugh, You Lose.
Good evening. I am your host, Magic Mike McGee. Your second favorite game show host, that is. Tonight, we are introducing our guests, Mancha and Santana. Some say Mancha fired Donald Trump and leveled up in doing so. Some say Santana's favorite cocktail is a virgin sex on the beach. So, on our game show tonight, the most extravagant game show of If You Laugh, You Lose, it is quite simple. You laugh, you lose, but with a twist. Today has been a hot day, and it's important to stay hydrated. Our contestants will have a mouthful of water while trying not to laugh. The winner will not need to shower tonight. So contestants, please hydrate and let's begin. If you see a robbery at the eye store, does that make you an eyewitness? Why did the yogurt go to the art exhibition? Because it was cultured. You can do it. What do you call a dog that can do magic? A labracadabrador. I'm reading a book about anti-gravity. It's impossible to put down. How many tickles does it take to make an octopus laugh? 10 tickles. Please rehydrate. Did you hear about the circus that was on fire? It was intense. Parallel lines have so much in common, it's a shame they'll never meet. Oh. I broke my finger last week. On the other hand, I'm okay.
I don't think she has water in her mouth.
How much? How does Moses make coffee? He brews it.
I'm going to win this thing.
And with that, I do believe Santana has lost tonight. Manshwa, I don't know if you got any of that water, but you don't have to shower tonight. And with that, we're handing over to Jan Ben.
Where's my prize?
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Guys, if you found this message helpful, I would really encourage you to send it on to someone else. Married people, single people, I think there's something for everyone in what was said tonight. A lot of wisdom was shared. So guys, I want to remind you, the power of 10, we've preached on it for the last 2 weekends, and I do think there's power in community. And we want to encourage you, sign up. If you want to host a meeting, put up your name. If you're looking for a place to attend church, it's all on Urban Life's website, so head on over there. And then in 2 weeks' time, I think, it is the 30th of September, which means that we'll be starting either Fearless Finance or Emotional Health, and you can sign up for both of those on Urban Life's website. So guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Guest, you were sublime. Top of your game, really enjoyed it. And then Mansha, you're an absolute legend. I don't know how you did not laugh. And then Santana, you did well, but I mean, I expect more from you, man. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks.